Autumn Hill Records recording artist Rob Silverman's latest album Drumology Volume 2, available now on all digital platforms. Rob Silverman doing duets with many of today's top drummers, including Billy Cobham, Kenny Aronoff, Carmine Appice, Vinny Appice, Glenn Sobel, Todd Sucherman, Casey Grillo, John Spinelli, Mike Mangini, with guests Weasel Zappa, John My Young, Michael Angelo Battio, Eric Marienthal, Jerry Goodman, John Patitucci, Michael Silverman and Jay Oliver. The landmark drum recording, Rob Silverman's Drumology series, is featured on the cover of Modern Drummer, streaming now from Autumn Hill Records.
All right. Welcome everyone to episode 56, live from my drum room. Got a great show today. This is part 3 of Remembering Charlie Watts. Hopefully you've seen parts 1 and 2. I've had some tremendous guests on both of those shows, and I've got some really great guys today with me in the waiting room right now, and hopefully a couple more are going to join sort of in progress, but if not, you won't be disappointed with today's guests, who are Simon Kirke, the legendary Simon Kirke from Bad Company and Free, my old buddy Greg Bissonette, Ringo Starr's current drummer, been his drummer for the past 13 years, and another old buddy, Steve Gorman of the Black Crowes, and Trigger Hippie, and a million other things. So they're waiting in the green room. But thank you for tuning in. I do want to mention to check out all these other episodes on my YouTube channel and to subscribe. I appreciate that. And what else can I tell you? Also available as podcasts. But this is part 3 of Remembering Charlie with a whole bunch of his friends. So thanks for joining. And without further ado, I'm going to welcome my esteemed guests. Let's see, I'm going to admit them all at the same time. So welcome Simon Kirke, Steve Gorman, and Greg Bissonette. Okay, gents. Yeah. We are, all right. Welcome everybody. Welcome guys.
Hey, Johnny.
Thanks for joining. Hi, Greg. Simon, Steve. Yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you. I'll start off by saying, just by coincidence, when we set this date up a couple of weeks ago, I didn't realize it, but 5 years ago today, I had this amazing memory or day with Charlie. They played a private show for the New England Patriots football team, the owner, Bob Kraft, at Gillette Stadium. And it was like 200 people invited. They had a tent midfield, and Charlie invited me out to the show, and it was you guys know from doing private shows, it's a whole different world as far as the sort of looseness of it, I guess you could say. And it's one of my best memories of spending time with Charlie, because he was just so chill and relaxed, and there was sort of no demands on his time, so to speak. So I kept thinking, I was in his way and I should leave his dressing room and let him get ready for the show. And he's like, I've got nothing to do. You don't have to go.
He loved you, Johnny.
Well, I loved him too. He was so amazing. But anyway, I put something up on Facebook because it just happened to be the same day 5 years ago. And
wow. The last time I saw Charlie, I was like, I'm a friend of John DeChristopher's. It's one of those, you got to throw your name out and then suddenly it's all cool.
Oh, that's too funny. And I was saying before we started recording that Simon, I had the honor of meeting you 9 years ago. We just were saying at a Stone show in New Jersey, and I knew you guys were old friends. And I'd love to hear the history of you guys, because I just the other day downloaded the super deluxe version of Tattoo You. Came out 40 years ago.
That's really when I obviously known them because of my relationship with Ronnie. Free and the Faces toured together in '71. It's a very blurred memory, I have to tell you. But when Ronnie joined the Stones in '75, by osmosis, I became friendly, with Keith and Charlie. And of course, I've always been a huge fan of Charlie's. And I was a little nervous about him, even though Ronnie was saying, look, he's the nicest guy on the planet. He's so quiet, etc., etc. But it wasn't until I went over to Paris to hang out with Ronnie, and when they were doing Tattoo You. And Charlie was so nice, because immediately when I went into the studio at sort of 2 a.m, that's when they started, 2 a.m, can you believe it? And poor Charlie, he was the the relatively sober one of the group, and they would go from 2 a.m until 2 p.m, completely at odds of what you and me and Greg and Steve are used to. But he said, look, I've got some new gear. And I must have said somewhere, I remember saying in an interview years before that, Charlie always used that same lovely old round badge Gretsch kit, which I believe he'd had since 62 or 63. And he never seems to get any new gear. And he said here, and he kind of almost dragged me into the drum room saying, look, I've got some new gear, I've got some new gear. And I'm looking at this kit and saying, what the fuck, Charlie? It's the same bloody kit that you've had for 30 years. This is in, I think, 89, or so a little less than 30 years. He said, no, look closely. I've got a new drum head and a new pair of sticks. And he's serious. I mean, he's dead serious. And I said, oh, great, Charlie. Well, you didn't break the bank upgrading your kit very much. And then I see this confetti that's, in all the hoops. And any good drummer, like this trio before me, likes a clean kit, because it makes the drums sound great, la, la, la. And Charlie says, oh, no, that's from the Dragon that we used to have on the 71 tour, spewing confetti, during Satisfaction. And it's been there for 20, I think 26 years, Simon. Yeah, I think so. But that was my first real intro to Charlie, and then I really love the guy. He's a great guy.
It reminds me, his former tech Chooch, who was with them for
Chooch, yeah.
We did some gigs with the Stones in '95, and that first day I go up to look at the kit, like every drummer ever Stones does. You just stand for it, And his throne, the legs and the stand of his throne, there was just this big wonky globby section. And I looked at it, and Chooch saw me note it, and he goes, that thing finally fell apart, and Charlie wouldn't let me replace it. I had to get a guy to come up with like a soldering gun and a welding mask and just fix it as is. He couldn't even get a new base to his throne.
Yeah.
I'm like looking at this stadium in Switzerland going, just couldn't pop for the new throne, huh? Okay, all right.
Yeah.
But there's so many of those stories, and obviously they're all true, because everybody's got one about him never changing a damn thing.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't. He wasn't that sort of guy, and yet he was quite a prolific spender when it came to clothing. I mean, we all know he was one of probably the best dressed drummer in history. I mean, you'd have to go back to the 30s and 40s to, people like Elvin Jones and, the Philly Joe, when they would wear those wonderful, black tie. Charlie always dressed so beautifully, and even his stage clothes were just these sort of pale slacks and gray t-shirt. But off stage, he dressed so beautifully. And cars. And I got a great story that Ronnie told me, and I wish I could have been there, but when he visited Charlie, stayed for a couple of nights in Charlie's house in the west country of England. And halfway through the dinner, Charlie said, oh, I've got a new car. And Ronnie said, oh, great. Well, let's go and see it, Charlie. All right. So after dessert, Charlie disappeared, and he came back down about 10 minutes later, dressed in this sort of driving outfit from the 30s with gauntlets and buttons down, like a double-fronted chauffeur's outfit almost. And he said, well, come on then. So they go through the house and into the garage, and there's this beautiful black Lagonda. It was in like 1938 Lagonda, beautiful. So they all get in it and they sit there, looking at smelling the leather and looking at the fascia and the whole thing. And Ronnie says, well, come on then, Charlie, let's go. And Charlie says, oh, I can't drive. I just bought it because I like it. So they just sat there making these sort of brum, brum sounds. And then after 10 minutes, they got out and went back and had dessert. But
he got dressed up to show him.
Dressed up to show him, Greg. Yes. That was Charlie.
That's it.
I've heard stories like that, Simon. Yeah, that he would go out and sometimes just by himself, just sit in the car and just feel like he was back in 1937. You know, just yeah. I've heard that. It's.
Wasn't he deep into buying horses as well?
His wife, they bought Arabian horses and bred them. And there's a great shot, I believe, from Vanity Fair from about 20 years ago. Charlie, he said we had these fucking horses in the living room. These two beautiful white Arabian whatever you call them, I don't know, geldings. And he said everything was great until they started firing away with these strobes, and then they just dumped a huge horse turd on the person.
Oh man!
So that was Shirley, not Charlie, but he went along with whatever she asked, obviously.
Wow.
Yeah.
He seemed like
you know Shirley pretty well, also, Simon.
Not so much. She was hard work, shall we say, and we'll leave it at that. That she didn't really come out on the road. You got to remember that Charlie was, by his own accounts, totally faithful, unlike other members of that band, which shall remain anonymous. But he was totally faithful. He was the first one to be married. I believe he was the oldest of the band. He was born in 1940 or 41. So he was the oldest. And, and all the others in the band adored him. I mean, I've never heard a bad word said about Charlie. And in conversations with Keith, who doesn't suffer fools gladly, Mick, I mean, obviously Ronnie, because they were only separated by a day. Their birthdays were only a day apart, but Ronnie was born in 47. They all adored Charlie because he was so patient, He says to me one day, he says, I got the world record for holding a piss. And I went, well, that got my attention. He said, yeah, 18 hours. And they were doing the Tattoo album, and of course, they didn't get started till sort of dawn. And Charlie's sitting there, always the first one behind the kit, twiddling his sticks. He could do that, Greg, like you do so well. He could do that.
I can't do it with both hands.
I could never do that. He did it while talking, And he sat there for 18 hours, and he said, every time I got up to go for a piss, Mick would say, 1, 2, 3, 4. Bloody hell. So eventually, Mick went out to do something, and Charlie scurries away to the toilet, and Mick walks in and says, where's the fucking drummer?
Oh no!
Oh, come on.
18 hours.
Oh man.
Poor Charlie.
Well, Simon, I have to tell you, so on that deluxe version of Tattoo You that was just released, there's a version of Start Me Up, which was called Never Stop. It started off as a reggae song. Yeah. And sure enough, now you're listed as playing percussion on it.
Yeah, I still get checks. I was getting all these checks from SAG-AFTRA, and I couldn't figure out for the life of me, and being an honest gentleman, I called SAG-AFTRA. I said, look, I keep getting these checks. And they said, well, yeah, it's a recording session in Paris, the Warner Pathé Studios at the Rolling Stones. And I remember playing congas. I'm a very basic conga player, but Charlie said, listen, why don't you, play congas on this? And I didn't even know what the song was, John, quite honestly. But it ended up being an alternate version of Start Me Up. And it was such a simple pattern. But no, I cashed the checks very quickly, I can assure you.
Simon, I always thought you played the claves on All Right Now, but you told me that was Paul Rogers.
Paul Rogers, absolutely. I remember it to this day, yeah.
You were just sitting out there in front of you clicking the claves. Huh?
I was doing, I think I was playing maracas and Paul was doing the claves. Paul's a very good drummer, by the way.
Paul,
is that right?
He's a great feel, great great tempo and feel. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, we.
Yeah.
Well, you're
Wow.
a very good singer, Simon.
You
I gotta
are.
say, I've seen you sing in Ringo's All-Star Band, and
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
a fine singer.
Thank you. Thank you. I
As-
try. Yeah.
Yeah, as is young Greg over there too.
Oh,
And your
Mr.
solo
Hooper.
albums, Simon,
Yeah.
where you did start a song.
I know. I know. What the hell? It's, you know, just because I used it 50 years ago doesn't mean
Because
that
it's the
I can't use it
coolest
again.
drum
Your
fill
Honor.
ever.
That's right. You own that.
But I want to just talk for a moment. You know, back in the day when I was coming up, obviously I was a generation behind the Stones, and I'd never seen a drummer play with the jazz grip.
Mm.
It was always the match. You know, the Searchers, Dave Clark 5, Jerry and the Pacemaker. No one played with this jazz grip. And I'm trying to remember the first song I ever heard of the Stones. There was a TV program called Thank Your Lucky Stars. And it was, the Stones came on, and Charlie was doing dunk, 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 you know, the Bo Diddley beat.
Oh yeah, not Fade Away, probably.
And yeah, and I've never seen that beat. But he was leaning over to his right, obviously, because he's a right-handed player, playing the floor tom, and he had this weird, I'd never seen this jazz grip before. And I don't think he ever changed. Maybe he got tired during a session or two. He might have switched to match. But every time I ever saw him, and I'm sure Greg and Steve would agree, he played that match grip, the jazz grip. And he got that wonderful slap. His backbeat, and I've made a note of Harlem Shuffle. You listen to the snare on Harlem Shuffle, it's a mile wide. It's because he hit it dead center, no rim shots. He wasn't even an inch off the dead center. And you look at his snare head, it had that sort of gray, 2-inch diameter mark where Charlie just hit it dead center every time. His backbeat was second to none, really.
Wow.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that song, and I hope Charlie will forgive me for saying this. When that record came out in the 80s, I was kind of like, being the fan that I was, I didn't dig that record a whole lot. I just kind of felt like it wasn't.
Well, it was a cover.
Yeah,
It was a cover, and the Stones were guilty, in inverted commas, of tipping their hat to their influences, etc., etc. I never thought it should have been a single. Quite honestly, it was a great album track, but it became this. One of their hits. Even though it wasn't the song.
Well, after Charlie passed away, they were playing, the Rolling Stones had their own channel on Sirius XM radio, the satellite station or radio network had a devoted Stones channel for a couple of weeks, like a limited time. And they were playing that song a lot. They were sort of looping a lot of the same songs, but I heard that song a lot. And I kind of went, what was I thinking? For that exact reason you said, Simon, I'm like, man, his fucking backbeat is just ridiculous in this song. Like, how did I overlook that and think that maybe it was the video that I saw that I thought seemed a little cheesy or something in the 80s, you know what I mean? But it's such
he never really, Greg, you bring your left hand back 24, 36 inches to deliver. You're a powerful drummer. I'm a powerful drummer, and I know you are, Steve. But Charlie,
super powerful, yeah.
Yeah, Charlie, it barely went past his nose.
Right.
Yeah,
and he just
right.
flipped it. This
Bruce Lee 1-inch punch thing,
Yeah, the Bruce Lee.
Oh, he never hit the rim shots. It was
really
always in
is.
the middle,
It's,
right? When you saw him, Simon.
Say again.
He never hit rim shots off the middle rim and the hook. It was always
No.
in the middle, huh?
It always dead center. He could have done if he wanted. He just had that eccentric. And I saw him at a private event at the Hard Rock in Vegas. We all went out there. And you're right, John. It's obviously, we've all done corporate events, and there are pluses and minuses. The plus was they got $2.5 million cash, and they had Robin Williams opening for them. That was fun. The downside was there were 300 drunken, I think it was Dell Computers or one of those internet firms, and they didn't go on till sort of midnight, so everyone was well out of it. and they couldn't care two hoots that the Stones were on stage. But
Yeah.
for an hour and a half, and they played a stripped down set, I got to see the Stones up close and personal, and I saw Charlie from about 20 feet away, as opposed to the stadium gigs where not only is he only an inch high, but his backbeat is 3 seconds after he's hit the drum.
Right.
And you know, that's so annoying.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
But to be
Yeah.
able to see Charlie so up close, it was wonderful, and he barely broke a sweat. I don't think I ever saw him sweat, whereas I sweat buckets after 3 songs. He just had this very implacable way of playing, and also the famous you know, lifting up of the right hand. And I said, where the fuck did that come from? He says, oh, Keith, he writes these bloody fast songs and I can't keep up. He did the song Shattered. Shattered, shattered. And it's the only way I could keep up. And it's like, yeah, okay, it works. I mean,
You know, I mean, when in '95, again, you know, we did a European tour with them, and we got to stand right behind him. There was a black scrim that from the audience just was like a black wall, but if you were behind it, you could look right out and see everything. You know, it was almost like a two-sided mirror the way it worked.
yeah.
And so we were standing, you know, Pierre, Keith Tech, and Chooch were like, yeah, come up tonight, you know, a couple different nights, and we'd be 5 feet behind his kit. I mean, right behind him.
Oh,
And
man.
I remember the first time doing that, it was like when you see someone who's 7 feet tall, like it just doesn't compute right away. Like,
Yeah.
and watching the ferocity of his
Yes.
play. I mean, I've listened to Stones records my whole life. I've taken everything I could from Charlie. I've done, you know, I'm a student of those records and his playing and all that. And I was not prepared for what it was like to be so close to him. Because as you said, he's, first of all, mild-mannered. He's tiny. Well, I'm 6'3". He looks like I could just throw him over my shoulder, you know, without
You
thinking
probably
twice.
could, yeah.
And like you said, that stick is hitting the dead center of that drum. You can see the marks. There's just basically one real mark because that's all he ever hits. And it, you know, and I hit really hard, but that changed everything. I mean, I literally approached drumming differently from that day forward. And it was more about just efficiency with, you know, how do I play as hard, but with just more focused, you know. It really, I said then that Bruce Lee 1-inch punch thing, it was just this phenomenal, you know, I'm not surprised he waited 18 hours to take a leak, because all I kept coming away with was it was like watching a guy play chess. Like he was so there, he was so completely present, and he had to be, because live especially, those songs are flying.
Yeah.
You know, because Mick doesn't want to groove, he wants to rock, and he wants to get 80,000 people excited, and they have to be up tempo. And I just, it really, there's just no way to, and the whole band sounds like a tornado, but it was Charlie. I mean, it was like that guy, and I'm standing there going, how on earth is this guy doing what he's doing?
Right.
Simon, the right hand thing is amazing that you just told us, because if that really came out, like you said, of him just wanting a break and his hand was getting tired, that's exactly what you told me about how you came up with the 40th take on All Right Now, playing quarter notes. I said, what a
Quarter
genius.
notes, yeah.
I off quarter notes. You said, we did so many takes, I just wanted a break, right?
Well, yeah,
I didn't know that.
I mean,
Wow.
we could do a little sidebar here, but I found that playing eights, when I initially played All Right Now, after, not only was it tiring after 4 or 5 takes, but it was a different groove. It was more of a pressured type groove. Dun, 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 dun. Whereas if you do bum, 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 it just swings. It swaggers a little more, and that's, you know, that's why it morphed into that 4 on the hi-hats. And now someone told me that Charlie borrowed this particular style way back in the late 60s from Jim Keltner, where he lifted the right hand on the 2, you know. I don't know. I just remember Charlie telling me that when Keith wrote Shattered, that's in order to keep up, that's what he did. I might be wrong, but and I do it now. I mean, if I'm playing a really fast tempo, and it's quite easy to do. We're pretty coordinated, us drummers.
Yeah.
But it's the Charlie Watts handoff. That's what I
Yeah.
call it. It's,
I saw Steve Jordan play last week with
oh yeah.
and he really honored Charlie with that. He really
Oh.
did that. Almost
Where did you see him?
I saw
You
him at
saw him
the
at-
SoFi Stadium where the Rams play. My friend that I went to high school and college with and was in Maynard Ferguson's
Oh, of
band
course.
has been playing
Tim.
sax with them for about the last 25 years. Tim Reese, and he got my son and I,
Right.
daughter and I had tickets, and we hung out, and it was so cool. And Tim told me, I didn't know this. Tim said that when Keith was putting together the Expensive Winos, Charlie had said, you know, who'd be a great drummer for your band is Steve Jordan.
Wow.
And
That's
then when
right.
he was also, you know,
Huh.
needing a sub, he
Yeah.
also threw in Steve's name again. He was the perfect guy to do it because he'd played so much with Keith. And
Yeah, true.
yeah.
True.
Anyway, it
I
was
think-
a great show, and the whole beginning was a great memorial to Charlie. It was on the big
Oh,
screen.
I got it. I'm seeing them in Atlanta, November the 11th. I can't wait.
Oh, that's
You know,
fantastic.
You know
That's
what?
great.
I'm running down for that one too. I'm so excited. 'Cause
Oh,
I-
you're going to be in Atlanta?
yeah. I missed them
Oh.
in Nashville. I was out of town. So, you know, when it was coming up, I looked at the schedule. So I'm going to get down to Atlanta.
World Series and the Stones, Steve.
Wow, you guys are making me feel like a schmuck.
Flights every day, Johnny, from Logan.
I know.
Oh, you're up in Boston?
I'm up in Boston, Simon. Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. And the closest they've come so far was Pittsburgh, and I opted not to go to that one. And Don, you know, Charlie, and now Steve Jordan's tech and I stay in touch. And he said, you know, any show you want to come to, let me know. And I've just
What are you
sort of went,
waiting for?
I know. Well, you know, now I'm the odd man out here. I got to
You
put my
better.
money where my
We're gonna
mouth is.
keep on you about this.
I know. Well, I was just going to say about the couple of quick things about the hi-hat thing. I've heard the same thing about Keltner, and then I've heard Keltner say that he got it from Levon Helm,
Oh.
and it seems to be one of these stories that has sort of taken on its own life. You know what I mean? It's an interesting thing, and I know at one point Charlie even, you know, I think he even said something like, someone asked him about that, and he said, I don't even know what you're talking about, you know, like
Wow.
he was like not even really acknowledging that he lifts off the four, you know, and
I did it. You know, I played with Bobby Keys. We put a band. Bobby lived here in Nashville, and in
Yeah.
2011, in between Stones tours, he was just. I don't know if you guys knew Bobby or ever spent any time with him, but you know, he's just a complete character to say the
Yeah.
very least.
Yeah.
And he was getting so frustrated. He'd come home and he'd lose his lungs. He was like, I gotta play when I'm not on the road, you know. And so, a few of us guys in town, we put a band together and we went out. Bobby Keys and the Suffering Bastards was what it was called, and it was just, and we just played all the songs he'd played on, you know, from The Wanderer, the Dion song when he was a teenager,
Right.
all the way through John Lennon songs, and I mean everything. You know, his discography's incredible. You can just pick,
unbelievable. Yeah.
but most of that stuff was Stone songs. And so when we were starting to play them, you know, it was pretty funny. I found myself, you know, you do that. Everybody does the Charlie thing, the right hand up. Just,
Right.
you know, if you're going to play Bitch or Shattered or, you know, anything, you just start doing it.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where I couldn't not do it. It's just the only way to play those tunes. Like it just didn't feel right. And it's not about consciously trying to do Charlie. It's just, you're trying to do the song.
Right.
Trying to make it feel right, and it's just, there's just no other way around it. It's a real, I don't know of anybody else who has such a simple thing that's just completely, it's indelible, it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere in that music. Is just that
Yeah.
simple lift.
And he would be the first guy to sort of poo-poo it and say, no,
Yeah.
don't focus on that. And I echo John's, comment that probably Charlie was almost embarrassed about this being
Mhm.
pointed out. And of course, what I guess a lot of the younger viewers don't know was that Charlie's real footing was in jazz.
Right.
That was his thing. He was a jazz drummer. And just by, I don't know, he was the only guy that the Stones ever worked with. He became this very influential drummer. But outside of the Stones, he didn't do much. And there are photos or there are YouTubes of him, you know, playing along with boogie woogie bands and with other jazz drummers, and he was just out along for the ride. You know, I mean, Greg, one of the great jazz drummers of his time, God, I mean, he expends about 1,000 calories for every 4 bars. Charlie expends 1,000 calories maybe every 4 shows when playing jazz.
Yeah,
You know,
you're right.
language.
Yeah.
You know, that was Charlie.
It was all
If you
time.
guys ever get a chance, check out this friend of ours, Tim Reese, the sax player.
Yeah.
He asked Charlie to play on his jazz album. And there's Charlie playing organ trio with Larry Goldings playing B3 and kick and bass.
Yeah.
Him playing sax. And they play a swing version. If you just go on YouTube, Tim Reese, Honky Tonk Woman, organ trio. And Charlie is just swinging like crazy.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah,
my
I've got to check it out. I've heard that. I've heard about this. Yeah.
And
Is it
Tim
Larry
Reese
Golden?
playing.
Who Larry Golden plays with James Taylor?
Yeah, he plays organ
Yes.
with James Taylor.
Yeah. Great
Tim
player.
went up and
B3
asked him
player,
on the plane. He said, "Charlie, I've got a jazz album I'm doing. Would you be into playing on a swing version of Honky Tonk Woman organ trio?" And Charlie went, "I love organ trio. I'll play on some other stuff. Let's ask Keith." And they went back and they asked Keith. So Keith and Charlie are on this great Tim Reese album.
There's a great story. Tim wrote about this, and he exactly what Greg said. So he mentioned he works up the courage to ask Charlie, and Charlie's like, "Yeah, I love organ trios. Yeah, let's ask Keith." So they go down and they ask Keith, and I guess the story goes that a few minutes later, Keith and Ronnie come up to the front of the plane and go, "We're in." You know?
Oh, Ronnie too?
Yeah, Ronnie too. I think
They did two versions. They did the Keith. It's called the Keith version with guitar, and then the organ trio. But Charlie's on both of them.
Yeah. Got somebody else joining. It says MacBook Air, so it's going to be a mystery until we see their face. So hang
All
tight,
right.
gentlemen. And we are welcomed by Don McCauley.
Hey!
All right.
All right. Welcome, Don, also known as MacBook Air. I'm going to rename you.
How are you?
Good to
Hey,
see you,
Don.
Don. Doing great. Thanks for joining.
Anonymity is key. I like how you roll, brother.
What's up, Steve? How are you?
Good to see you, man.
Yeah, you too. You too.
Don, say hello to Simon Kirk.
Simon,
Nice
great to
meet
see you again.
And you.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
I have to tell a quick Steve Gorman story / Bobby Keys story. So this would have been, Don, I don't know, it might have been 2013, one of the shows, either like at the Echoplex or maybe one of the Boston Garden shows. I bumped into Bobby backstage, and I'm honored to say I share the same birthday as him and Keith, December 18th.
You have the
So I went
license.
up on it. Yeah, license to shit in the streets, you know. But Sagittarius, Keith's famous line, half man, half horse, license to shit on the street. But
Ah,
I go up to
Your clean living, John, enabled Keith and Bobby to run as fast as they could. Like you had to balance that out. So your sacrifice is duly noted.
So I go up to Bobby and I reintroduced myself because we'd met a couple of times. And I told him who I was, and I said, I'm a friend of Charlie's and a good friend of mine, Steve Gorman. And his reply was, "Steve Gorman, that guy's a great drummer." And I just thought, I told you about that, Steve. I think I texted you later, which I just thought was so great because not that he didn't acknowledge the fact that I was a friend of Charlie's, but when I mentioned Steve's name, he went, "You had just started playing with him." And I think you had not long before that, you had texted me a picture of the back of your car. You said, "These are my drums. I'm on my way to my gig tonight with Bobby Keys." And I'm like, "Oh
Yeah.
my God, that's going to be amazing." You know,
I
Yeah.
thought you were a
Anyway.
friend of Dorothy's.
of Dor.
Sorry.
Anyway,
Quick side note on that regard. Bobby would just, everybody has Bobby stories if you spent 5 minutes with him, but the best was when he would be looking through his phone and he would find photos that he had put in there and forgot about, and he wasn't quite sure how to access them or anything, but he would find an old picture like a Polaroid, and then his son Jesse would put it, take a photo of a photo so Bobby could show it to us, type of thing. And he had pictures from Exile Sessions, and he had pictures from, there was a photo of Ringo and Keith Moon with both wearing headphones standing at two sets of congas. and Bobby's in the background, and then we'd all say, "What session is that?" He'd go, "Hell, I don't know." But he had a lot of those stone. He had photos of those of the '70s sessions. The legendary whatever the South of France stuff, and they're murky as hell, and it was a bad camera and all that. But Bobby would, when we started playing together, he would never tell me what to do or anything, but he would always laugh and say, it started with, well, man, you've been doing your homework. And I was like, how do I explain how much I know how to rip off Charlie Watts? I mean, like the band, like my band did a really good job of that, like, you have no idea. Like I dropped out of college so I could go to Stone School, basically. You know what I mean? We were, I had endless, especially making our first record, the first time really in a studio, those tracks, like we have a song on our first record that's essentially Sway rewritten, and getting in the studio and feeling a little in over my head, and then listening back, I would get I was concurrently relaxed and more uptight listening to Charlie's tracks in that setting. You know what I mean? It was just like, oh, that's all I got to do is that. It's so simple and so easy. And that started for all the talk about Ringo's tracks or Bonham, or for that matter, Neil Peart, Charlie, and all this stuff we're talking about, the thing that always blows my mind is the conventionally straight drummer, simple fills, blah, blah, blah. His drum tracks are as identifiable as any other drummer. True. If you just take the stems, if you just put on, and not just to us, a bunch of drummers, there's 30 or 40 Stones tracks that a peripheral fan, if you just play the drum track, goes, oh, that's Honky Tonk Women, or, oh, that's Miss You, that's Shattered, that's Paint It Black. There's such signature parts, and in live, as we said, they bumped the tempos live, and it was all about the performance and the show and all that. But still, I'm always been blown away at how he's never talked about as such a phenomenal studio drummer, and so artistic and so creative and musical.
Definitely.
Because again, he's the engine room on stage, but in the studio, man, what the simplest, most creative little, the hi-hat on Angie. That's all you need to hear. Yeah. Like that makes the song.
Yeah.
It's fucking unbelievable, that guy.
Yeah.
Well, his style was not bombastic. It wasn't like Mooney or Bonzo. And of course, you can mix and match. None of those drummers could have sat in Charlie's stall. Because they were just, I think Ringo possibly could have, if Ringo could have subbed for Charlie for a couple of songs. Their styles were pretty similar, but no one other than Charlie. And I know Steve is a perfect substitute for Charlie. Steve, not only is a chameleon, he can play any style, but his roots are very simple and strong and sturdy with simple fills. And of course, he's had this relationship with Keith for nearly 30 years, and they got their friends. So it seems that it was the perfect substitute for Charlie to come in. And of course, I spoke with Ronnie a couple of days ago, and they all thought Charlie was going to come back. He'd had a recurrence of his the cancer was starting to come back, and he'd gone in for treatment. So they had no idea. And Charlie said, "Look, you've got to honor these 13 shows. We got all this crew, 300 crew. We can't let them down. We can't let all the fans down. So get Steve in." That was the first choice, and I think Steve is wonderful. And Greg, you saw them last week. How was it?
I saw them last week at the SoFi here where the Rams play, and I'm just thinking of another similarity between Steve and Charlie. The first time I met Steve Jordan, I was a huge fan of his playing on Letterman and the Steve Kahn Casa Loco records and all kinds of stuff. But we were doing this tribute to Buddy Rich at the power station in New York City. And I said something like, "You should meet me over here." And he said, "Well, I don't have a driver's license. I don't drive." And I went, Steve Jordan doesn't have a driver's license. And here you are in the car with Charlie. Telling Ronnie he doesn't drive. It's like,
wow. How about that? Yeah. And I think I heard, Don, you might know better, but I think I'd heard they met way back in '78 when the Stones did Saturday Night Live, and Steve was the house drummer in the SNL band at the time, and Charlie really dug his playing, and they sort of connected there. And then through the years, like I think when it came, I think as you said, Simon, or someone mentioned that when Keith went to do the first Winos record, Charlie said, "You should get that guy Steve Jordan."
Yeah, great.
That was the conversation. Yeah, that was a conversation Steve had a lot, coming into this, was that he had already met him way back. They had already had a major relationship. And of course, throughout the years, coming in on recording sessions and things like that, he's been around. He's been around, and trusted that he can hold his own, halfway, three-quarters of the way through the night,
Yeah, he sure did a great job at the concert last week, man. It was such
Which one did you go to? Did you go to the first or second?
Tim Reese got my kids and I tickets to the SoFi, one of the SoFi shows in LA.
Was it the first one or second one? Do you know?
It was the second, I think. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. That was a great show.
Oh,
first one was great, but the second one really had something special.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
So great.
Yeah.
I think you've got this sort of perfect storm of a rejuvenated band, because Steve is, I believe, is only 60, in his early 60s, very fit.
Yeah.
So he's giving them a little bit of extra muscle. You've got this affection and for Charlie, and everyone in that stadium misses him, and then you've got the fact that the Stones are out there on stage doing it, for Charlie and honoring Charlie. It's I can't wait to see them. I really can't, because I know I'm going to shed tears when they have the tribute, because I loved him so much, and it came as such a shock. And Ronnie told me no one was allowed, because of the COVID restrictions, no one could go to England for the funeral, and that absolutely tore all of them up, particularly Keith. And Keith can still not speak to at great length about Charlie still to this day, because he was so he loved Charlie so much. And the fact that they couldn't go and say goodbye to their pal, and when Chooch died, they all downed tools and flew to Michigan, all of them, on a private plane to bury Chooch. That's how tight knit a band they were, that they would honor their crew, because Chooch had been with them for decades. So it tore them up that they couldn't say goodbye to Charlie.
Yeah.
That was a tough day, tough news to get, Yeah.
But
it's interesting. Like just the number of conversations I'm sure we've all had. There was just this general, almost like a conventional wisdom of, this will probably be the end of the Stones, and I just thought that's the exact. There's no way. That's like you said, Simon. You talk about a rejuvenation, a recommitment to now honoring Charlie. Like every time they take that stage, it's a testament to what Charlie Watts brought to that band, and that's not. And obviously that's coming from Steve, but to the other guys, it's like you couldn't drag them away now. That's just not possible. It's like it is a. It's like that. It's like an athlete. Like, you retire, like, I'm going to pull the plug, and then you lose your last game, and you're like, maybe I got another season in me. You know what I mean? It's like,
well, they would always look
going to go out on Stone's terms.
They would always look to Charlie when it came to touring, and Ronnie told me this, that Charlie, number one, being the oldest, and as we know, the last year of his life, he wasn't the most healthy guy. They would call up Charlie and say, "Listen, Charlie, we're thinking of going out next year. What do you say?" And Charlie would give the thumbs up. But now that Charlie's no longer around, I think you're right, Steve. I think you're going to see the Stones for another few years. They'll probably do another world tour. It's not beyond the bounds of possibility. I have to go because I got an appointment in a few minutes, but I want to leave you with this great Charlie story.
Yes,
I went to see them a few years ago in Philadelphia, and they took me, all through the backstage, past all the. I said hello to Ronnie in this wonderful dressing room with weed smoke and shit and fucking reggae playing and 5-star meals. But then you go to Keith's dressing room and it's even more palatial, and he's got speakers coming out that, and everyone's like grooving. In fact, and Keith said to me, there were so many people in his dressing room. He says, Simon, I can't wait to go out on stage in front of 80,000 people for some peace and quiet. But then they show me the Charlie's, and Charlie's dressing room is like, you know where they keep the brooms backstage in arenas? This was Charlie's dressing room. It was tiny. It was like a cell. And he had, listen to this, drummers will appreciate this. He had a little practice pad with a pair of sticks on a small table and an orchid, one orchid on the table and a little glass of water. And he was doing, practice. There it is. Look at that.
Yeah.
Practicing paradiddles. And I said, Charlie, how are you, mate? He says, I'm fine, Simon. He says, I hear you're not drinking anymore. I said, nah. He said, would you like a glass of Perrier water? I said, thank you, Charlie. Thank you very much. So he goes and gets a Perrier. He doesn't drink, So me and him have a little clink our glasses. And then from next door, we hear this, la, 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 la. La, 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 la. So what the fuck's that? He says, oh, Mick, he's just got this bloody vocal instructor from the Royal Opera House in London, and he's on the road with us, and that's all I hear before I go on stage. La 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 la. So we sat there, me and him, and I'm just getting a little teary just thinking of that moment, because that was the Charlie I really loved, and I'll never forget him. He was one of a kind.
That's
He
so
was quite
beautiful.
He was quite fond of you as well. I know that for sure.
Thank
He
you.
really was. Yeah, he talked about you quite a bit. He's a straight ahead rock and roll drummer, but he swings like none of those other guys.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow, from one swinging rocker to another.
Right.
And I was going to say, I know you have to run, Simon, but I think it's so cool that you have that memory, because I think about the history that you guys have, like 50 odd plus years, so to sort of be in that situation where you're both drinking your Perrier and there's Mick doing his vocal warm-ups. It's kind of like, here we are now,
yeah. And the unspoken word was singers. And with that, gentlemen, I have to leave you. John, we'll do a one-on-one soon. Greg, lovely to see you, brother. And
You too,
Steve,
Simon.
and you, Don.
You as
my
well.
love to everyone.
Great to see you. Great to see you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Simon.
Thank you, John.
All the
God
best to
bless.
you. See you soon. Yep. Bye-bye.
Johnny,
Wow.
can I tell my story about the Tony Williams lessons thing with Charlie?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if you guys might have heard this, but my friend Tim Reese, who's playing sax, as you know, he tells Charlie that his buddy from Maynard's band has been taking lessons with Tony Williams. And all of a sudden, Charlie, being the jazz aficionado that he is, he says, I want to talk to him about that. So he arranges it. I think it was, oh gosh, I can't remember the year, but it was at the Mighty Duck Forum in Anaheim. Any idea what year that, like maybe 10 years ago?
Sounds familiar, but who knows?
Yeah. But anyway, there's Charlie, and Tim says, this is my friend Greg, who, took lessons with, and he says, what was it like taking lessons with Tony Williams? And I started to tell him, and I'm saying we used to play double drums. We talked about grip. We talked about everything being from the ride cymbal, and how when he got with Miles, he was 17 and he was too young to be nervous. It's not till you get a little older that you get nervous. And how he'd look out at the audience and he'd try to blip it, blip it, blip it, play a lick. And I started getting really into it. And then Steve Ferroni comes out of the right-hand corner. Charlie, what's that? And my whole stories went to kazoots right there. I was like, I can't finish my story. Thanks a lot, Steve Ferroni. No, I love Steve. But I wanted to just tell Charlie so much about it because he was so into it. He just wanted to know so much about Tony and Elvin and Roy Haynes and Philly Joe and, Max Roach. That's what he really played drums for, man.
Yeah. Absolutely. Don, I know you have a comment. I was just going to say, I went into great detail in the last one of these we did, so I won't go over, on and on about it, but he, I think what allowed me to sort of be led into his orbit was the fact that all those guys were still alive when I met Charlie, and he knew that I knew them, and I think he liked me too. I don't think it was just that, but the
Everybody
fact that,
likes you, John.
well, but the fact that I had this sort of, connection to Elvin and to Tony, I knew Max a little bit, Louis Belson, and we would talk a lot about those guys. And he was, it used to blow my mind when we have some of these, when we'd have time to actually have a conversation, and he'd talk about seeing some of these guys or listening to him when he was younger. And there was this, I'll shorten this story, I promise, very much, but we had lunch together in London in 2008. And we went off and did a bunch of these errands that he had to run. And he was introducing me to these people, like the guy that makes his custom shirts and makes his custom shoes, as an important man in the music business who knows Roy Haynes and Elvin Jones and all these famous drummers. And
Love it.
and the guys, the guys in the shops are looking at me like, wow, that's really great. And I'm thinking, yeah, but I'm here with Charlie Watts right now, like those guys. Yeah, but he's like, he's a very important man in the music business. So it was just, it was a really incredible day.
Can that stick? Can that be part of your whole moniker? A very important man in the music
But
business.
it already is. It already
is.
Well,
it's a staple.
anyway, no.
He would let you into his world. He would invite you into his world if he liked you, if he was interested in what you had to do, what you were all about. And that was for sure. And you'd see it. He'd have his, he'd be drab all day, just like, oh, I got to go through this whole mess of touring and all this stuff and travel.
Yeah.
But as soon as you start talking about something of interest, like jazz, or let's go to Motown Museum, or let's go do something, or so-and-so's coming by, or Tony Williams, like a conversation like that, he had this glimmer in his eye that just lit up, that sort of like glazing at something, this bar of gold,
Wow.
and then he'd reveal himself.
Don, have you seen this Rob Shanahan photo?
I have, yeah. I saw Rob last night, actually, in the crowd with Hillary.
Oh,
And he was in Keith's pit. He was looking right up, and he was he had lunch, I think, with Steve as well. And of course he's taking a picture.
yeah.
Well, I thought Rob was going to join us today, but I guess
saw
something came up. I don't.
Must have got stuck in Minneapolis.
Oh,
Yeah.
Minneapolis. What
His
I was
hometown.
thinking is that Charlie hadn't played a Roland kit before, and he was going,
Right.
"Wow,"
I saw that.
And Ringo gave him the sticks, and he's looking down like, all right. And then there's a video of him playing and having fun with it too. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have that image right there. Rob gave it to me on a small little hanging, and I love the idea that you're seeing them exchange sticks. Maybe it's
yes.
others, but they're back and forth. You're the butt end of the stick, and then the eighth one in front. And it's like, no, you take it. No, you take it.
Oh,
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful. Yeah.
I have a picture Rob gave me right after that was taken. I'm going to get it. Hold on a second.
how much longer are you out for, Don?
We just added another date. We just got to Florida, and we come back to Florida at the Seminole Hard Rock the day before, 2 days before Thanksgiving.
Wow, very good.
But then, of course, next 2 weeks from that, I'm wrapped up and going to doing stuff related to it. But
Man.
yeah, we're out for a little while. We've been out for a while. It's been,
Where's the date you added, Don? What town? Which
it's in Hollywood, Florida.
Hollywood.
Is
Florida.
the-
That's
yeah,
Fort Lauderdale
yeah.
area. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is from that same day at Ringo's house.
That's great.
And last week I was talking to Keltner. I was hoping he could join us today, but it's going to be a different day that Keltner's on this. And as I'm talking to him from right here, I'm looking at this picture, and I said, I'm looking at this amazing picture of you and Charlie and Ringo that Rob sent me. And he said, Jim, he's just such a sweetheart and such a humble guy. I said, oh man, that was an incredible day. He said, I still, and this is Jim Keltner saying this. He said, I still have to pinch myself that I somehow, I don't know how, I met these two guys. We were all about 30 years old at the time, and became friends. and they, you know, he's like, we're talking about the two greatest rock and roll drummers ever, and somehow they let me in their world, and we, you know, we're friends till the end, and he got a little choked up. We've spoken a few times, and he got choked up talking about Charlie, and so yeah, it's amazing that I'm just so happy that was captured, you know, that day was
Ah,
captured by Rob, you know.
you know, Johnny, Ringo has a story about being at a party. I don't know if it was at Ringo's house or at Charlie's house years ago, and Bonham was playing on the drum kit, and the bass drum was just sliding, and there's Ringo and Charlie holding the bass drum,
Yeah.
and John's just playing, and it's sliding.
Oh
Don,
my
did
God.
Charlie ever talk about that?
I've heard about that. Yeah.
What does he say about his recollection?
Big fucking bass drum.
Yeah. Was it at Bonham's house?
I have no idea about that, but he did tell me about, you know, his interaction with John Bonham. He's like, oh yeah, you know, and that rock and roll thing, you know. And of course we got Charles Connor to come out, the original, you know, original guy who wrote that part, right? And so that was a big conversation about John Bonham, and, you know, did he get it right?
Oh,
Yeah, it was pretty wild.
wow.
And Charles Connor is teaching Keltner, myself, and Charlie the train beat, but the train swing.
Keep on knocking.
Yeah, which Little Richard brought him down to the train station and said, play. You know, he's telling us the story.
Ah,
He's from Louisiana, and he's like,
yeah.
we're all just like tuned right in. It was incredible. But yeah, you know, a lot of conversation about John Bonham that day.
Does
And
it
Jim had a much more in-depth relationship with him, you know, than
Yeah,
Charlie.
Yeah. I was just going to say, Steve, I remember, I've talked to you about this a whole bunch of times, I know, but I remember when the Black Crowes, when you guys did that tour with the Stones in Europe, and I hadn't met Charlie yet, and I was just so like excited for you. And I remember you telling me, like, when you all the internal strife aside that was happening in the band in those days, when you guys were all together and saw them, it like gave you like a whole new lease on life in terms of how you viewed the Black Crowes. Like, you went like, okay, guys, like, this is the real shit right here. And like all our
we
little
had
petty,
and for about 3 months, it really meant something to us. But you know, things fall apart as they do. But no,
Yeah.
But as that was happening, yeah, like I said earlier, just being able to stand right behind him for a set behind that scrim. Yeah, I took more than just his playing from it. It really was he and Keith's connection.
Yeah.
You know, they were playing Monkey Man, and Keith was just standing. He just stared at Charlie the whole time. And so, you know, Keith is 3 feet in front of Charlie, and I'm 5 feet behind Charlie, and I'm just watching those two guys for 4 minutes locked in. And it was, you know, and it was so intense. At some point, I'm thinking, is this shtick? Like, what is Keith doing? Like, is he taking a mental break? Like, he's got his back to the crowd, but he was just so digging into you know, he was just like floating on Charlie's water. You know what I mean? That's what he's doing. And to see it up close, it took away a lot of my, I took from that I need to remove an awful lot of, up to that moment, I didn't realize how much ego or different, you know, things in my playing. It's like, it's that if you find that connection, you lock in, you hold on to it for dear life, you know, in the moment.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can never, any musician, you don't stop learning. You don't stop being reminded of what you're there to do. But man, that lesson was hardcore. I mean, it hit me like a bat to the head, you know? And, I mean, I look back now, and I have for years, with a little bit of regret, but at the time, like I said hi to Charlie a few times, you know, we'd chat for just a minute, but I was well aware of the fact that if I start a conversation with him, he's going to have me removed from the room. Like,
I don't know about that.
if I pop this cork, man, it's going to get bad. You know, he's going to be like nice for a minute, and then he's going to give that little look to somebody, and I'm going to
Throw
be
a stick at you.
older.
Don, when did you first start working with Charlie?
For the 50th anniversary 2012 tour.
12.
And yeah. And I was just thinking about what Steve was saying about the space between Keith and Charlie. And my very first day knowing about being involved with the Stones, I started a couple of years earlier with me and Pierre de Beauport, Keith Richards guy, playing music together and living in the same town area. And so he had kind of told me about it. But on day one, he put me between the two of those guys in a chair, sat there for 2 fucking hours and saw the space between them and saw the heat that was happening between that. It's unbelievable. That is the connection, and it is right now with Steve as well, with Keith, of course. But that on day one, it does hit you over the head and it knocks you out. It changes your life as a drummer.
Yeah.
Did Charlie count off all the songs and get the tempos? And does Steve do that now, or would Keith ever start the tempos? How does that go down with starting the song?
Oh, it's territorial.
Yeah,
It's territorial. I mean, there's Keith starts some of his stuff. Of course, Chuck Leavell does a fantastic job of keeping everybody wrangled together.
Honky Tonk Woman Cowbell, right?
Right. Well, yeah, even and then counting off, he's got everything. He's got the books and he's done a lot of studying. And Steve, of course, now too is starting some songs because he's feeling it from the center,
And did Charlie do that too? Did Charlie start some songs off?
Get off my cloud, things like that, which of course he's going to set the tempo. He's going to feel maybe a few, but you also got to understand at rehearsals, they'll run through 80, 90 songs over 5 weeks, 3, 4, 5 weeks.
Yeah.
And they'll just do like 25 or 30 for the tour,
Yeah.
But they go through a lot of songs. So they'll start, oh yeah, you always used to start that off. So why don't you start it off again? And they'll try that. And if it doesn't work, Chuck's like, I got you back. Chuck is there for you. So it's pretty rapid. It's pretty fast.
Because Ringo doesn't like counting off songs. Paul always counted the songs off, so he'd rather not have to count it off. It's kind of a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure.
It is.
Yeah.
If you want it to be the right tempo. Yeah.
Right. What's more important, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's you have that decision of, do I want the pressure or do I want to be mad for the next 4 minutes?
Yes.
It's a balancing act at all times.
Would you like me to start this too fast or too slow?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, you were saying like when you guys played with them in the 90s, they definitely, a lot of the tunes were amped up. There was definitely more up tempo. And I think as time went on, and maybe it was Chuck Leavell's influence on the band, that they really seemed to dial that in much tighter. I know that when I started to go to all these shows in the late 90s, like I'd be at sound checks and, being at a few of them. And I don't want to say anything out of school, but I would hear Mick comment on, like, if they did Tumbling Dice at a sound check, and he'd say it seemed a little fast, can we try it again, and it's and Charlie once said to me, just we were talking about tempos, and it was when I started playing again, and I was telling him I'm just so fixated now on tempos that I make myself crazy with it, and he said something like, Keith, as long as the tempo is close, Keith is happy, but Mick seems to be a little more fixated on it being really, and I guess as the singer that makes sense, but I remember we had this sort of like drummer to drummer sort of commiseration about tempos, and he said as long as it's sort of in the zone, Keith is, he'll make it work, and they can get their mojo going. But
well, I mean, it's incredible to recognize. I mean, you said earlier, Don, was it the first or second show in LA? Oh, that second one was special. It's still a living, breathing, real band. And,
all the way through. Every single time they play together, it's they make the most of that tempo or that vibe.
Yeah.
They'll run with it. They'll just run with it because they know the song is the song.
Yeah.
The tempo, as long as it's moving. I mean, it's a lot like jazz, of course. So you gotta, as long as it's moving forward, and if it's not too slow, for Mick, everybody else can play the parts very, very easily.
I'm laughing because I remember the last show I saw was in 2015 here in Nashville, and
remember that.
And I'm standing at the soundboard with my son. He'd never seen them before. He was 15 at the time, and they had a great night. It was fantastic. And Chuck had told me, Chuck Leavell had come on my radio show the day before, and we're on air, and he said, "Oh man, it's so locked in. It's great. And we hit the commercial break, and I said, So how is it really? You know, just because, you know, you gotta, he goes, no, I'm not making it up. No, it's like, he goes, man, Woody is in amazing shape and he's pushing Keith now and their interplay is, you know, and we had this, so I was excited to see it even more so. But I was watching that show that night and every time a song would start, it would fall in and, you know, you can't help but compare it to 72, 70, you know, you're thinking about all the different times, every version I've ever heard of these songs played live. And there were moments when you would hear it within the first 8, 12 bars, all of a sudden it's like, oh, they found the gear. And there it is. And it stayed.
Yeah.
And it was mind blowing to me. And then on top of it, like you just said, the songs are the songs. And then I'd go, God damn, they got good songs. This band's really, you know, it's like,
I know.
but I was like, that's actually the same people. That's those guys made Sticky Fingers and they're still here. I mean, it's just overwhelming at times.
And
They know their songs. They know their songs very, very well, you know?
Yeah.
Like Keith is always listening and studying. I mean, they definitely are extremely hardworking. When it comes down to Exit University, it's a job. And that's the one thing about Charlie too, that I think everybody knows is that he was there. He was working. He was the only guy really. He was the only guy really. Working, you know, he's always been the working drummer from day one.
Yeah.
So.
Don, I got to tell you, your sound out front, man. I'm not sure who your house front guy is. He's probably been there a long time, but
Dave Natal.
Love it. What's his name?
Dave Natal. He's the best. He's also a drummer.
Oh,
And
man.
he's been drumming. He was drumming before he was mixing sound, and he analog 100% and nothing.
I didn't know what that stadium is. $4 billion, huge football in and out stadium, indoor.
Too big, yeah.
It sounded like a record way in the back.
Yeah.
It was so perfect. You could hear everything. It's funny, but you could hear everything because when Mick came back and played the maracas, though, the maracas got a lot louder.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Fix the money.
It's a huge part of the band too. A huge part of the sound. Maracas, yeah.
Yeah, man.
Wow. Well, guys, we could go on all night and I so appreciate you guys doing this today and joining me. And Don, thank you I know you just landed in Tampa and thanks for just coming over.
Just woke up, yeah.
But thank you guys so much. Steve Gorman, Greg Bissonette, Don McCauley, Simon Kirk, who was here earlier. You guys are the best. Love you guys. Any final thoughts before I shut us down?
I do. I have one. I can't wait to get into that room.
Yeah, I can't wait to have you in this room.
Check out your drums. Yeah, do some trading eights. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or in my case, like 7.5.
7.5. Yeah.
I've always said when I get there, I'm playing lefty by guy. I'm not leaving that room until I figure it out either. So
All right, Steve.
we're gonna need some water, some snacks. I got some work to do.
You know it. And the other room, I have plenty of right-handed drum sets set up just for you guys too. So
Now, as a wonderful husband, are you going to have Zildjian sticks for us or Vic Firth sticks for us?
I have pretty much all Vic Firth sticks in the house. Zildjian sticks, they're made by Vic Firth, but
I know.
that was a long time ago. So now
I know.
I use the real things. So Greg, we'll tell that story another time.
Okay.
All right. Thank you guys so much. Guys, hang tight for 1 second.
I will say this for what it's worth. Like everybody, when I saw the news, John and Don, you're the first two guys I thought of. And I just, John, you and I have talked plenty privately, but, it's just the loss that everybody feels having, this appreciation that was always there, but now is so honed and sharp, it seems. You guys have a special, I've thought a lot about you since, and I'm happy to see both of you. And Don, I'm going to see you in Atlanta in a couple weeks. And
great. Oh, great.
I've thought about you guys a lot. I know it's a very much more than I felt, a personal one. So my condolences.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. I appreciated you reaching out when you did. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Look forward to seeing
And
you.
Greg, Greg, as per usual, my thoughts with you are just, this has been more than enough time. And,
Ah! Still got that
You know.
Pearl snare drum?
That's are always great. You know what I mean? Those first 3-4 minutes with Greg are always a joy.
You know, man. Play us out. We'll do some play out music.
Oh,
We love you.
yeah.
Love you guys too. Thank you guys so much. This has been so great. Steve Gorman, Greg Bissonette, Don McCauley.
See ya.
Thank you guys.
Cheers, guys.
I'll see you guys soon.
See ya.
Hey, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.